Hello everyone, my name is Sebastián Sanchez, and I am here to present my edition of the Koussevitzky Bass Concerto in fifths tuning. The reason that I decided to write a fifths edition is because there are many pieces in bass repertoire that are written for basses tuned in fourths, and there is a scarce amount of pieces written for basses tuned in fifths. I wanted to take this opportunity to write a transcription of this piece with my suggested fingerings for basses tuned in fifths. In this presentation, my colleague I of Koussevitzky and myself will be demonstrating the differences and challenges that may be encountered in this piece between fourths and fifths tuning. This presentation will focus only on the first movement of the concerto. Now, before I start talking about the concerto, I would like to talk a little bit about Koussevitzky and how his concerto became well known. So, Sergei Alexandrovich Koussevitzky was born in 1874 in Vyshny Volochysk, about 250 kilometers north of Moscow, in a poor Jewish family. His parents were professional musicians, and they taught him to play violin, cello, and piano from an early age. At 14, he obtained a scholarship to attend the Moscow Philharmonic Society, where he studied bass and music theory with Joseph Rumbushek. The Moscow Philharmonic Society is currently known as the Russian University of Theater Arts and is the largest and oldest independent theatrical arts school in Russia. I find this important because I believe that this would influence him to write and perform the way that he did. According to Gary Carr in an article from the American Symphony Orchestra, he states, "It is written in a turn-of-the-century Russian bel canto style." Speaking of Koussevitzky's bass concerto, Koussevitzky was fascinated with the idea of imitating the human voice with his bass. In his concerto, you will see how he has melodic lines that just sing out as if it were an opera singer singing. He also has this intention with other works of his. He married a ballerina, Nadezhda Galatz, in 1902. With the help of Renaud Glier, he created his famous bass concerto. He premiered it in Moscow in 1905. The reason why I mentioned his first wife, Nadezhda Galatz, is because he divorced her in 1905 after performing his concerto, and shortly after married Natalia Konstantinovna. The same year, I believe that they had a big impact on his piece. The piece is very dramatic, showing different emotions such as sorrow, anger, and tenderness. Koussevitzky's wife Natalia was the daughter of an extremely wealthy tea merchant, which would help him later in his career. He moved to Berlin with Natalia to study with Artur Nikisch, who was the principal conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic at the time. It is believed that Koussevitzky paid off all of Artur Nikisch's gambling debts, and that is why he taught him how to conduct. To his advantage, he was able to conduct in the Berlin Philharmonic and move on to become the director of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Because of this, he was able to perform his concerto and other works with different orchestras. Later on, Gary Carr started performing Koussevitzky's concerto, and this brought more popularity to his concerto. Alright, so now a little bit about the bass and the concerto. The original key of this piece is in F sharp minor, but a bassist who plays in fourths tuning usually has to learn this piece with fingerings in E minor from orchestral tuning. A bass in solo tuning, F sharp B E A, is tuned up a whole step from a bass tuned in orchestral tuning, E A D G, allowing the performer to play in the intended key of the piece and to allow the sound of the bass to be able to cut through the piano or orchestra with more ease. In fifths tuning, C G D A, it is not necessary to alter the pitches of the strings, since the highest string of the bass tuned in fifths would be tuned to an A already. Having the high A string makes it easier to adapt pieces that were meant for bass repertoire and solo tuning, since you will have the same notes due to having the same A string. There are some differences when performing, but I've come to find out that there are many similarities because of the common A string. Here is my colleague I of Koussevitzky to help demonstrate. The first excerpt that I will talk about is right at the opening when the solo bass comes in at measure 8. Both basses tuned in fourths and fifths will begin in the same manner, but arrive at a different position once they reach the low D. When the bass tuned in fourths gets to the minor arpeggio, A, F sharp, C sharp, the A is usually open and the F sharp and C sharp are played in the same position with the same finger. When a bass tuned in fifths gets to the same minor arpeggio, they would play an open A as well, but will play an F sharp with the index on the D string and C sharp with the pinky on the G string. Excerpt number 2 will start on measure 50. It is actually possible to play this excerpt on the same string for both basses if you would like to shift through the sevenths. The other manner would be for the bass in fourths to play a D with the thumb on the E string and stretching with the ring finger to reach the C natural on the A string. Other than the seventh leaps, it is played the same until you start descending into our next excerpt at measure 62. In measures 60 and 61, the fourths player usually would play C and B with pinky and middle finger on the E string, then cross over to the B string and play G and F sharp with the same pinky and middle finger to reach E on the B string. In fifths tuning, you can easily play the D on the D string and use your ring finger to play the C natural on the A string, which is a closer distance opposed to the distance in fourths. Also, in measures 60 and 61, you can play C and B with pinky and middle finger on the D string, then continue to stay on the same string and play G and F sharp with the same fingers and descend down to E on the same D string. In measure 62, we arrived to the ascending triplet arpeggios. The only difference that I found was in measure 62, in the manner that both tunings reach the E natural on the A string. In fourths tuning, normally you would play the E on the B string with your middle finger and ascend up a minor third to G with your pinky, then cross over to the E string, use your middle finger on B, and finally cross over once more to reach the E with your middle finger on the A string. The notes of this passage are closer but require 2 string crossings, but I found that in general both tunings play the same until measure 129, since they both stay on the A string. In fifths tuning, you would normally play the E with your middle finger, ascend to G with your middle finger, then ascend to B with your pinky on the same string, then make 1 string crossing and shift back to E on the A string. You can play the same pattern on the same string 3 times and cross over once to reach the E. The last excerpt that I will talk about begins in measure 129, the double stops. In fourths tuning, bassists will play the F sharp with their index finger on the E string and A with their thumb on the A string. They then would use their middle finger, sometimes ring finger, to play the C sharp and D. The same pattern is used to play the other double stops. In fifths tuning, the bassist would use their middle finger to play the F sharp on the D string and their thumb to play the A on the A string. Then they would use their ring finger to play the C sharp and D. Again, the same pattern is used when playing the other double stops. Alright, so in summary, I just want to say that I would not consider one tuning system superior over the other, but rather we can use them as tools to use to our advantage. In the solo piece, there are some differences, but each has their advantages over the other. So pick your poison and learn this masterpiece by Sergei Alexandrovich Koussevitzky. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you learned something today.